I want to show you this a video from this channel, chat, because this guy is a Star Trek creator, Steve Shives, kind of a lib, and he posted this video. Hey, Democrats, get it together.
Talib.
I think I would call him kind of a Star Trek social democrat, Star Trek lib. You know, he kind of gets that Star Trek is a progressive show. Right. I don't know if he would call it a socialist show. Maybe he would call it a socialist show. But he posted this video, and I just wanted to show it to you very quickly because it does. I kind of take this as a normie detector. Like, where are the normie libs at right now? Where are normie libs at? And just kind of get your reaction because and let's be good faith. Let's be good faith. Let's not go at this at 1,000 miles an hour. But I'm just curious.
I was just reading an article in what I still quaintly refer to as the paper about Samuel Alito, the United States Supreme Court Justice, who not only flew an upside-down American flag at his home in Virginia in an apparent show of solidarity with the January 6th insurrectionists, but also flew an appeal to heaven flag, which is associated with Christian nationalism, at his vacation home in New Jersey last year. And what are we doing? We've got one Supreme Court justice flying insurrectionist and Christian nationalist flags at his houses. We've got another Supreme Court justice, Clarence Thomas, with ties to the far right, who's married to someone who supported the January 6th insurrection. We've got the presumptive Republican nominee for president joking about how he's going to be a dictator and his surrogates going on TV and saying they'll only accept the election result if their side wins. This is serious democracy in the balance level stuff. And yet,
okay, but here's the thing. Here's the thing, Steve. You know what? I agree with you. You know what? I agree with you. I could be a radical socialist, but also not underestimate the threat of the far right. I agree with you. Here's the problem. Here's the problem, Steve. The Democrats don't act as if this was the case. There's no one to vote for. If I believe the Republican Party is a threat to democracy, there is no one to vote for because Joe Biden and his Democratic Party just voted to uphold Mike Johnson as the Speaker of the House, even though he had a 1-vote majority, and there was a vote to remove him as Speaker. Why can't the Democrats find one Republican to flip parties and take the House? Because they don't want the House. They like being in the minority. They like losing. So what's the deal with that? That's the situation that we're living in, which is we've got a Democratic Party that doesn't want to fight the Republican Party. So even though I agree with you on everything you just said, that the Republican Party is a fascist party that's a threat to democracy, the Democratic Party acts as if it's not. That's not sustainable, man.
According to the polls, the presidential race between Biden and Trump is pretty much a tie.
I would say pretty much a Trump lead, but I'll give you a tie because at least you're not delusional in thinking Biden's winning. At least he's not denying the polls. So I'll give him a tie, even though it's probably not true. I would say that it is a tie in the national popular vote, but that Trump is winning in all the state level polls. Therefore, he'll have over 270 electoral votes, which is all that matters. But you know what? I appreciate you for not being disconnected from reality and at least admitting it's a tie, which acknowledges that Trump could win.
I ask again, what are we doing? I'm directing that question to President Biden. Rhetorically, of course, I doubt he's actually watching. Recently, I did a video speaking to my fellow progressives, urging them to vote for Biden this November, despite his indefensible enabling of the State of Israel's mass murder campaign in Gaza. This time, I want to address Biden and the other Democratic candidates running this year who need us to vote for them, and in all honesty, who we need to vote for if we want this whole representative democracy thing to continue for a while longer. We really need you to win this thing.
All right, so couple things. I really do appreciate him taking the time to say that it is a mass murder campaign in Gaza. However, man, like, here's the thing. If you can recognize that it's a mass murder campaign, you should also recognize that the people that are supporting that are evil. If they're not willing to be reached, if they're not willing to go out there and change that position, and they're going to support a mass murder campaign by the fascist government of Benjamin Netanyahu, doesn't that mean that they're not good? And that their winning is likely not going to be... Like, if they're willing to sacrifice Palestinian babies, why wouldn't they be willing to sacrifice American babies for their own advancement? Aren't they demonstrating a level of depravity that makes them a threat to even take power or hold power? The problem, of course, is it's a competition between two depraved individuals. And I'm sorry, but that's an unacceptable choice.
The stakes are pretty high. You say you know this. You keep telling us how high the stakes are, how crucial it is that Trump and the Republicans lose this election and lose it big, and that's great and all. But what we really need, instead of you telling us how high the stakes are, is for you to start acting like you know how high they are. Because here's the thing, Mr. President, I'm voting for you. I'm locked in. I vote by mail here in Maryland, and if they sent general election ballots out this early, I'd vote for you right now and get it over with. I'm voting for you because I have to, because there's no other viable choice. Well, actually, there is another viable choice, and it's Donald Trump. So like I said, there's no other viable choice. But a lot of other people, liberals, progressives, leftists, people who are inclined to support many of your policies and proposals, aren't sure if they're going to vote for you, or have already decided they're definitely not voting for you. A lot of that sentiment is rooted in your support for the genocide the state of Israel is carrying out in Gaza. I know you don't call it a genocide. I'm not here to argue semantics.
Damn.
Refer to the organized and intentional destruction of
Based. He's cooking.
entire cities, the withholding of humanitarian necessities for a captive population, and the mass displacement and killing of people in that population, using whatever term you're comfortable with. The point is, it's bad, and you support it. You support it politically and rhetorically by justifying the Israeli Defense Forces' military actions and by downplaying the scope and severity of the atrocities they're committing. And you support it materially by supplying the IDF with weapons. You've even recently...
The reason why we're watching this is because this is somebody who has appeared on my algorithm from Star Trek related content. He's a normie content creator, and he posted a video, and I wanted to see a normie check. What is he going to say to his audience of Star Trek fans about Israel and genocide? And you know what? This is cooking.
Condemned the International Criminal Court for charging Benjamin Netanyahu and other Israeli government officials with crimes against humanity, and threatened to sanction the court if it attempts to execute warrants in that case. You were fine with the ICC going after Vladimir Putin for his crimes, but you couldn't rush to Netanyahu's defense fast enough. Even the fact that the ICC is also charging leaders of Hamas with crimes against humanity wasn't good enough for you. You used that against the court. You said they were drawing an equivalence between Israel and Hamas. I'm sure if the ICC had announced it was prosecuting Israel but not Hamas, you would have thrown a fit. But when it announces it's prosecuting Israel and Hamas, you criticize and threaten the court for that too. It's like the only move you would have found acceptable would have been just letting Netanyahu get away with it. Not a good look, Joe. But not all of the reluctance to vote for you is because of Gaza. A lot of it goes back farther than that. A lot of it comes from a fear, or maybe just an assumption, that you aren't willing to do what's necessary to stop Trump and his supporters
What the fuck? This guy's cooking. This guy's cooking a fucking meal. This guy is cooking like Ben Sisko. I thought he was going to end up cooking like Riker. I thought he was going to cook a Riker omelet, and he's making a Ben Sisko feast. The chef is in the kitchen, folks. Those are what we like to call Star Trek references, chat.
Already in government from doing what they want to do. Again, you talk a good game, but we don't see action. To be fair, it's not just you. Democrats in Congress have reacted to the Justice Alito is an insurrectionist reports, mostly with disappointed shrugs.
And that's because, okay, so Steve, oh my God, this is a radicalizing moment for you, Steve. I need you to sit up in your chair, and I need you to understand something. Is that the Democratic Party under Joe Biden and the centrists in power, I'm talking about your Hakeem Jeffries, your Nancy Pelosi's, your Chuck Schumer's, your Joe Biden especially. They do not want to win because they understand the stronger the Democratic Party is, the more likely it is that progressives get a majority and could start passing legislation that their donors don't like. I'll give you an example. Tax raises on the rich. A lot of the Democratic Party's donors are rich people. They don't want their taxes to go up. A lot of the donor class, and those are the most influential people, are big supporters of Israel. That's why it doesn't matter that the vast majority of Americans want a ceasefire, Steve. The people that have the ear of Joe Biden, like Sabin, yeah, the guy from Power Rangers, he sends him a personal email about how he needs to support Israel or else. This is the situation that we're living in, is that when Citizens United came down and unlimited corporate and cash was able to flow into our elections, the Democratic Party, which was already distorted by private money, became a disfigured wreck, riven with contradictions. The problem that we have is, why was Joe Biden unpopular? Because he didn't pass his agenda. Build Back Better was blocked. And I know a lot of people like to cope with the IRA, and they like to cope with the bipartisan infrastructure bill. But that shit was peanuts, folks. Now Biden is doubling the prices of solar panels by putting tariffs on the Chinese solar panels. China makes 90% of the solar panels in the world. So when you put 100% tariff on the solar panels, you're doubling solar panel prices for Americans. When he bans electric vehicles, 6 of the Chinese electric vehicles, 6 of the top 10 electric vehicles in the world are Chinese. How are we going to transition to a green future if we can't have solar panels? We can't have electric vehicles. Are we building high-speed rail crisscrossing the country? No, we can't even get a high-speed rail down the California coast. We have railway speeds slower than they did in the 1920s. And Joe Biden isn't proposing we do anything about any of that. And so we have a war in Ukraine that is dragging on forever. We have a genocide in Gaza that we are the primary supporters of. We have warmongering and confrontation with China. And we have standard of living of Americans declining. Life expectancy declining. Housing affordability is at an all-time low in my life. I was born in 1984. It is the most unaffordable time to buy a house right now since 1984. That is the reality that we're facing. And price levels are much higher than they were when Joe Biden took office. He didn't raise the minimum wage, not $1. The last president to raise the minimum wage was George W. Bush, not Obama, George W. Bush. Signed it into law in 2007. 2007. Where were you in 2007? So he's got very little in the way of accomplishments. And we can go down the list if you really want. And I'm not saying there's nothing, but it's nearly nothing. And it's certainly nothing big enough to change the course of experience for millions of Americans. Is your life getting better? It's not. And for a lot of Americans, the super dole of 2020, the pandemic benefits, was the most financially secure they were in their entire life. That wasn't Joe Biden. That was under Donald Trump. It was Donald Trump that stopped student loan payments. Joe Biden restarted them. And you could have a bunch of excuses for why that is. But that is the problem that we're facing, is the Democrats are not delivering on their promises. The Democrats are not making our lives better. The Democrats are putting us into quagmire after quagmire after quagmire. They're blowing hundreds of billions of dollars. Here, I want to give you an example. You remember that pier in Gaza? Remember that pier that they constructed for $300 million? $300 million, and it collapsed. Aid starts entering Gaza through land after U.S. floating pier damaged by weather.
To the Pacific Southwest.
The Israeli Navy is helping the U.S. recover ship that stabilized President Biden's $320 million pier. $320 million for a fucking photo op that failed. That is Joe Biden's legacy. And so how could you be surprised? He's the guy who says he wants a strong Republican Party. And it's just not optics for the cameras, man. He really believes it. I'm sorry, but at a certain point, he's got to go. He's got to go. And I don't want Donald Trump to be president. I know there's going to be terrible consequences. But the one thing I do know is that the Democratic Party, as it is now, is not fit for purpose. It is not fit for purpose. And I don't know what it's going to take. I really don't know what it is going to take for the people to wake up and throw away these scumbags like Barack Obama.
And look, I get that there are political realities here that we must contend with. The president is not an all-powerful despot yet. And the Republicans control the House of Representatives, and the Democratic majority in the Senate is as narrow as it can be. Plus, the Supreme Court is 2/3 conservative justices. There are limits to what you can actually do executively and legislatively.
That's true. He's right. You're right, Steve. Except Joe Biden isn't pushing up against those limits. That's the important thing to understand. Joe Biden isn't pushing up against the limits. And when you look at successful presidents in our history, the ones we all agree are the best presidents, FDR, Abraham Lincoln, they were pushing beyond the limits of what the executive could do for the American people. Joe Biden is a shrinking violet.
And I am frequently frustrated by my passionate but poorly informed fellow progressives who act like the Democrats could just fix all our problems at will if they wanted to and blame them for not doing that. But come on, Joe.
Okay, here's what I would say to that is I never ask the Democrats to do something that they don't have the power to do. And I do it when they came into office. I called for them to pass bills like, I'll give you an example. Let's make DC a state. Why wouldn't the Democratic Party want DC to be the state? To be a state. It wouldn't be the smallest state by population. It would be 2 more Democratic senators. It'd be another Democratic representative locked in. It would make the Senate less biased toward Republicans. It would add a small Democratic state to help balance out all the tiny Republican states. It still wouldn't be enough, but it would give the Democrats a little bit more wiggle room so they don't have to win every single swing state plus some red state senators in order to have control of the Senate in the long term. That's not even entertained. Why is that? You've got 700,000 plus Americans in DC that don't have legislative representation. Can you imagine if there were 700,000 Republicans in a similar situation? They would be a state 50 years ago. So what's going on here, man? And for me, and here's the difference between me and Steve, is if Joe Biden was calling for the good things and being blocked by his own party, and he called out the senators and Democrats that were blocking the good things from happening and said they are pariahs of the Democratic Party, if he was trying to pressure them, I would be okay with failure because at least he would be fighting the fight. He would be caught trying. But Joe Biden doesn't operate like that. He doesn't operate like that. He protects those people. Nancy Pelosi and the Democratic establishment went down to Texas to endorse one of the most right-wing anti-choice Democrats, Henry Cuellar, against a progressive young woman, Jessica Cisneros, in a tight primary. The Democratic Party was there for the most right-wing Democrat showing up for him. Why were they doing that, Steve? And now he's been indicted by the FBI for taking bribes. From what? Azerbaijan? Who is he even taking bribes from? And they knew there was an FBI investigation when they ran down to cover for him. This is the problem, Steve. Is you can't pretend that the progressive and socialist members of this polity are uninformed when we are highly informed about the inner workings of the Democratic Party and why it doesn't want to actually win and why that's the crisis. Look at California. They have a supermajority of Democrats in there. And what do they have? The highest population of homeless people. They've got high, out-of-control housing costs. They've got terrible public transit. They've got extreme income inequality. They have all of the same social and economic problems that the rest of this country has. And the Democratic Party is paralyzed. There's barely a Republican in that state as far as the legislature goes. And yet the Democratic Party is not leading the way with solutions. It is leading the way with neoliberal rot.
Even within the limitations of those political realities, you know you all could be doing more.
Thank you.
If you can't act executively or legislatively right now, use the media, use the bully pulpit. Why isn't every elected Democrat on Capitol Hill trying to get in front of every microphone and camera they can find and demanding explanations for the Alito flag thing? Declaring that the American people have a right to know if one of their Supreme Court justices supported an attempt to overturn an election. For God's sake, at least look like you're trying. At least give people some reason to believe you would do something about it if you could. I'm voting Democrat because I have to. Because there are only two viable political parties in this country, and the Democrats are the better option. But I'm not registered as a member of the Democratic Party because I have to be. I am because I want to be. Because I believe in what the party says its values are. Because I believe in the good that it has done and could do in the future. But for there to even be a chance for
they don't agree with it, man. They like, if you're a progressive party, the Democratic Party is not for you. It's for corporate strivers and climbers.
Good to be done. You all need to get your shit together. Because we're not Trump isn't enough for a lot of people. Seeing you, Mr. President, on TV making a token acknowledgement of there being too many civilian deaths in Gaza isn't enough, especially while you continue to support the government that is murdering those civilians. I know this is a cliche, but you need to give people a reason to vote for your side, not merely against the other side. Voter apathy has been a problem in this country for a long time. But these last few elections, that apathy has started to coagulate into full-on nihilism.
It's happening because they're right, Steve. The Democratic Party doesn't represent us. The Democratic Party is not seeking justice, fairness, and progress. And it doesn't accomplish what it says, and it doesn't even bother I'm promising things anymore. Joe Biden doesn't have a single issue on his campaign website.
Little discouraging. It's frustrating, too, because this is a problem that runs in both directions. Yes, I get it. From your perspective, it's not worth trying to appeal to leftists and young people because they don't vote in large numbers. But from their perspective, those leftists and young people don't vote, or at least don't vote for Democrats, because they don't see the point.
Well, this isn't even true. There are a lot of progressives that vote. The vast majority of Democrats supported almost every single plank of Bernie Sanders' campaign. They're there's just a lot of people that have been trained to follow the tune that the mainstream media is calling. And there's a lot of progressives who do vote, who do show up. They are the backbone of the Democratic Party. That's the reality.
Each side is amplifying the problem and convincing themselves even more strongly that the other side isn't worth the effort. But you know what's the most frustrating thing to me? Every time I see you, Mr. President, or any other Democrat moderating their tone or lowering their expectations or carefully calibrating their language in order to draw in people from the right or the center right, all I can think of is how many people from the left you're running off by doing that. It's as if mainstream Democrats think the only way to win an election is to flip enough Republicans. 36% of the people in this country are aged 18 to 44. Most of them support gender equality and equality for queer people. Most of them support racial justice. Most of them support immigrants and refugees. Most of them believe health care should be a human right and available to everyone. Most of them believe in higher wages and more rights and protections for workers. Most of them support a permanent ceasefire in Gaza. And when they vote, more of them vote for Democrats than for Republicans. So why are you taking them for granted? Why are you taking the risk of alienating them by stubbornly continuing to back Benjamin Netanyahu's government committing war crimes, or by chasing after Republicans and trying to get them to vote for you? These are your people. Or they could be. They should be. Like I said, this is a two-way problem, and a lot of the reasons that younger voters or voters who are further to the left politically have for not supporting Democrats, for thinking both parties are the same, for thinking elections don't matter, strike me as silly, as misinformed, as unreasonable. But you're the politician. You're the one asking them to vote for you. Many of them will vote for you. Many more would if they thought they had a reason to, if they thought you and other Democrats could be counted on to do the right thing and to fight for them. There are examples among elected Democrats that you should follow. Democrats with guts. Democrats who are fighters. The Squad, Representatives Ocasio-Cortez, Presley, Omar, and Tlaib. Senators Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren and Ed Markey. My God, if we only had 50 more Ed Markeys in the Senate. The governor of my state of Maryland, Wes Moore. You don't have to try and win elections by snatching crumbs away from the Republicans. Hey, here's a thought. Fuck the Republicans. If you motivate and mobilize progressives in this country to not only vote for you this time, but to keep voting for you in big numbers in every election, you won't need to tiptoe around trying to enact a few reforms here and carry out a few new policies there without upsetting people on the right. They're not the majority. They don't give a shit about the Constitution or the rule of law or free speech or anything else they claim to care about. They shouldn't get to run this show.
So here's the thing, Steve. The last time the Democrats did that, the guy won in 4 terms. All right. And so they changed the Constitution to not allow a person to run for more than 2 terms as president. Okay. So they don't, but you're hitting on it exactly right, man. They want to tiptoe. They want to enact reforms here or there because the Democratic Party is the party of conservatism. We have a conservative party and we have a reactionary party. That is American politics right now. We don't have a progressive party. We have delusional progressives attached to the conservative party and done so because they're threatened by the reactionary party. But we don't have a progressive party. We don't have a left-wing party. That's the reality. Not even center left.
Ask again. What are we doing here? Do we want a country with a government that is empowered and directed by the will of the people, that works in the interest of the people? Do we want to move in the direction?
Should I watch the Hutch versus Gremlow debate? How long was it? It would be kind of fun because Hutch is really kind of a huge bitch.
Of justice and liberty and equality, or do we want to go the other way? Because it's up to us, all of us. We, the people, have our part to play with our voices and our votes, but you politicians have a role here too, Mr. President. I want you and the Democrats to win this election. I want my fellow Americans to shake off their apathy and nihilism. I want them to vote for you. Give them a reason to.
Dino, thank you for the 10 tier ones. All right, I mean, overall, I think that video, I think his heart is in the right place. I think he's wrong to trust people like Elizabeth Warren. When the going got tough, Steve, she was there to help plant the dagger in the back of Bernie Sanders. That wipes away every other action she ever took. She stabbed Bernie in the back instead of coalescing around him when he was the front runner. That says everything you need to know about where Elizabeth Warren really is. She can't ever be trusted.